at Riverport, which is now known as, what's it now known as? Verizon Amphitheater? What's it called now?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Hollywood Casino.
Hollywood Casino. Yeah, Hollywood Casino Amphitheater. It had just opened up. It was their third concert. It was Guns N' Roses. And it was the Riot at Riverport. 25 years later, our next guest has written all about it. It's called Riverport Riot, an oral history of Guns N' Roses show in St. Louis. Christian Schaefer, how old were you in 1991?
So I saw about it on the news. I was not in the stands during that show, but it pretty quickly passed into St. Louis rock and roll lore. So it was fun to go back 25 years later and write about it for the RFT this week.
Yeah. So the fallout was, how many people were ultimately injured?
About 61 people was about the number that I kept coming up with. About 60 or so people were injured, and a number of those filed civil suits against Axl Rose a little bit later. So there was a whole series of court cases that went on. But about 60 or so people were injured. Steve Shankman, who opened Contemporary Productions and built Riverport, estimated it was about a couple $100,000 worth of damage to the facilities. So yeah, it was quite a riot as they go.
Is it true that Axl Rose is not allowed here in St. Louis, or if he is, he'll be arrested?
No, I don't think that's true. I think he did come back about a year later, about 1992. He did come back. Bill Stump Stevenson was the fan who snapped the famous photo of him that caused Axl to leap off stage and basically body slam him. So they settled out of court as well, but there's about a 3-week stretch where they were in the courtroom together. But I think Axl is welcome in St. Louis from a legal standpoint. Now, whether fans would buck up to see him, I guess, is, I don't know if we'll get to make that call or not, because they had put us on their reunion date tour, and that date got quickly taken away. So if we ever get a Guns N' Roses show in St. Louis, is a kind of an open question right now.
So Guns N' Roses isn't loved in St. Louis because Guns N' Roses. I'm sorry, Guns N' Roses isn't because of this riot from 25 years ago.
It's interesting. I didn't get any sense. I talked to Favaz over at KSHE, and I asked, I said, did you guys stop playing Guns N' Roses after this? He's like, no, we never really stopped playing them. It was never like there was some boycott.
Right.
They were a big enough band that people still liked them a lot. But I do think a lot of people soured on Axl's persona, at least at the time, that this was one of many shows where he had been late to the stage, or there was some kind of shenanigans with him and security or him and fans. St. Louis was in the early stage of a very long tour, but the very first date of that tour, which was somewhere in Wisconsin, he was 2 hours late to the stage. So this was a pretty part and parcel deal for the band in 1991.
So it was the photo, but then was it more than the photo? Was it the guy taking the photo that really set him off?
It's hard to say definitively. Most people, it's funny when you go and watch, the entire video is up on YouTube, like the entire concert up to that point when he jumps in the stage. And I went back and watched it, and there's no sense. If you were sitting in the seats watching the show, you didn't get any sense on the microphone that Axl was dissatisfied with security. He had a sort of persona, but he wasn't yelling at people or complaining about security. So it was sort of a split-second thing that he spotted the guy, and 10 seconds later he jumped in and, again, body slammed him, basically. So whether there was some sort of, there's been a rumor that there might have been a feud between Axl and the motorcycle gang that this guy was a part of, which adds a whole level of intrigue that I couldn't quite get on record. But that's been suggested. But really, I think there's a pretty long string of events in Guns N' Roses touring history that suggests this is just what he does. Or at least back 25 years ago, this is what he did a lot of.
Christian Schaefer with us. His cover story out today. Newsstands everywhere. Also, riverfronttimes.com. It's the 25th anniversary of the riot at Riverport. And you go back and you sort of talk to as many people as possible who were there, individual stories. And I reading the article, it's interesting to me that Axl Rose just kept bad-mouthing St. Louis, it seemed like.
He couldn't let it go. It was, I have quotes in there from him a couple days after, I think in Dallas or in Houston, and he's talking about how he keeps reading about us in national newspapers, St. Louis, and he's on MTV a year later talking about how St. Louis security didn't know what they were doing, and the venue was brand new. And I talked to Steve Shankman about this, and he says, yeah, we were a brand new venue, but he'd been promoting shows for something close on 30 years at that point.
Right.
So, he really puts it at the feet of security and management. And there's really no indication that there was a breakdown in in the protocol, as Steve Shankman says in my piece, I can't control an act leaving the stage. I can control a lot of pieces, but not a rock star jumping in and pummeling his fans.
I want you to know, it pains me to actually agree with Steve Shankman, but he's right. Security can't handle when Axl Rose jumps into the stands. I mean, you just can't plan for that. So, so what's your favorite part of the piece? You have a lot of great nuggets of information in there. What's your favorite?
Boy, it's hard to pick. You know, it's like the level of destruction that went on there was interesting. I talked to a friend of mine named Scott, who was 15 at the time, and he talks about kind of rushing towards the stage. And the thing I heard over and over again was that these blue seats were flying. Like, people were just breaking, like unmooring these big sections of seats, and they were sort of stepping on the seats and snapping them off and throwing them like Frisbees. Walter Wright from the security company B&D said one of his guys took one to the head like a Frisbee. But Scott took with him the seat from Riverport, and he had this sort of odyssey to get back home to Millstadt, Illinois from Riverport. He got a ride in the back of a pickup truck, and he's leaving as all these police cars and sirens are coming into Riverport. 400 police were called to the scene. It was a Code 1000 riot. So Scott, who's 15 years old, is trying to get back home to Millstadt, 40 miles away, and he's got this blue seat with him. And his father doesn't want to hear it and makes him throw it away. So he's got this piece that, like, even at 15, he had the presence of mind to say, this is going to be important. This is going to be a part of my childhood. And his dad made him trash it. Didn't want to hear it.
Yeah. But he did keep the bolts.
That was my favorite part.
20,000 people were there that night?
They estimate about 17,000. Riverport held 20. It wasn't a sold-out show, but about 17,000 were there. And again, the security guy I talked to said, and this is not a small number, but he said it was really closer to 15 or 2,000 people, like 1,500 or 2,000 that were really in the maelstrom. So it wasn't everybody.
Sure.
I think a lot of people hightailed it out of there, but a bunch, kind of bum rushed the stage. And there's another great story about how, I guess, police or security were using a fire hose to try to get people off the stage, but because they used pyrotechnics, the plumbing system automatically shuts off the water. So these police officers are trying to spray down these agitators with this soft trickle of water, and it just sounded like a Keystone Cops routine or something. And again, and no disrespect to anybody that was there, just it was like this perfect storm of it's hot in St. Louis. You've got a drunk, rowdy crowd. You've got an act who is agitating the crowd and late to the stage. And I just think there was a lot of factors that made it kind of as legendary in St. Louis as it is.
The Riverport Riot, as depicted by our guest Christian Schaefer, Riverfront Times. It's a cover story. It's up and out now. 17 people were there that night. I've met 32,000 people who say they were there, though, all these years later. Christian Schaefer, Riverfront Times, thanks for coming in.
Thanks, McGraw.
You got it. It is 7:26. We'll play a little Guns N' Roses for you.
And to think, hey, nowadays, everyone takes photos at concerts.
Yes, but the fact that it's up on YouTube.
Yes.
7:26. Big 550 KTRS. Let me talk to the Post on KTRS.